hub,
and spoke. Audio Collective.
This is The Briny, a show about how we're changing the sea and how the sea changes us. In our last episode, we visited a lake in Maine where dam removals and fish passageways have brought a species called alewife back for the first time in centuries. Quick update on that project. This year's numbers are in, and approximately 3 million fish arrived in China Lake to spawn in 2024. That's a ton of alewives. So what's a few more? Today, for a little bonus episode, we're headed to another alewife run. This one at the Damariscotta Mills Fish Ladder in the towns of Newcastle and Nobleboro in mid-coast Maine. But first, hang on, why do we care about alewife again? Here's a quick recap on that from one of the workers I met at the fish ladder, named J.B. Smith.
The more alewives there are in the world, the better the world is, because they're a primary food source for just about everything in the world, Ospreys, eagles, everything just eats them.
Herons, otters, even whales eat alewife and other river herring like it. They support a food web that extends from lakes like this one all the way to the open ocean. And the only thing they need from us to keep doing what they do is to give them a way to get upstream to the lakes where they spawn. Just as in our last episode, dams on this stream powered factories starting in the 1700s. The difference is, here, local folks started noticing that dams blocked the alewife run hundreds of years ago, and they did something about it. There's been a fish ladder letting alewife get into this pond since 1807. That has kept the alewife population pretty healthy here. So much so that for over 200 years, people have actually harvested some of the alewives that come here to spawn. Back in the day, people would smoke the fish and eat them. And you can still get smoked alewife when they're in season at an amazing smelling shack near the fish ladder. They're tasty, but I have to say, quite bony. Nowadays, most of the fish harvested here goes to lobstermen.
They're going to start harvesting soon, and then we're going to start selling them to lobstermen. It's magic. They take these fish, they throw them in this wire basket, they throw it overboard, and it turns into a lobster.
That's Richard Powell, who works at the fish ladder. Alewife makes great lobster bait. In the parking lot, lobstermen waited in pickup trucks for the first harvest of the day to come in.
Some of them come and literally spend the whole night in the truck so they can be first to make sure they get the fish.
That's J.B. Smith again, who was working the harvest that day. He stood on a giant steel contraption that looked a bit like a tiny drawbridge. Two guys stood on one end with long poles, tapping the rocks on the bottom of the river to encourage the fish to move forward. Every so often, giant scoops would lift up out of the river, pouring water out. The fish caught in those scoops were then dumped onto a metal floor where they flopped around and eventually died. Then Smith swept the fish off the floor and into a long metal trough.
So this looks like a conveyor belt for fish.
It is a conveyor belt, and the fish bought it. The old one was all rusty and falling apart. So this nice stainless steel conveyor we put in about 3 years ago or so. So thank you, fish.
That conveyor belt brought the fish down to the area where other workers would load up totes full of alewife and sell them to the lobstermen. Smith has been working on the alewife harvest for the better part of a decade.
What do you like about the work? What keeps you coming back?
Well, asked me about a half hour or whatever it was ago that I woke up a little after 4 to get here, and you'd have a different response. But right now, it is quite lovely here with the fog and the sort of the natural environment, and then hanging out with the other harvesters. There's camaraderie involved, and it is a service to the lobstermen and to the reproduction of the alewives, because if there wasn't the harvest, there'd be probably less interest in the fish ladder, I would guess.
That idea reminded me of something that Nate Gray said in our last episode. He was explaining why just restoring the habitat by putting in a fish ladder wasn't enough. You have to make people understand why it matters.
To undersell it and just simply put in a fish weigh, you failed. Because you'll be right back, the fish would be plugged up by beaver boards and gunk, and nobody will be paying attention.
The harvest here only culls a small fraction of the alewives that go up the fish ladder every year. But it lets people know that these fish are here and reminds them why they should care. The fish ladder itself looks a bit like a rock staircase with water pouring down it.
This is the first pool of the fish ladder, and you can really hear the sound of the alewives slipping up over the ramp to the next pool up.
Like I said, it's been here since the early 1800s, but by the 1990s, it had started to fall apart.
Our fish ladder was in really bad repair. The fish were not getting up there anywhere near the number. In fact, they even shut down the harvest in the late 90s because there just weren't enough fish.
Mark Becker was one of the guys with long poles working the harvest, and he remembers what the ladder looked like a couple of decades ago.
It didn't function well. I mean, the stone walls were collapsing. There were pools that didn't work. There were a lot of places where people had tried to fix things in ways they thought would help over the last, who knows how many years. And so the fish weren't getting up as well as they could have been, and there was a real high mortality rate.
So beginning in 2007, a group of locals came together to figure out how to rebuild the fish ladder.
People came to our house, once a month or whatever, and talked about what to do and came up with wacky ideas to raise money. And our first fundraiser was probably 2008, and it was a bean supper.
Then they got more ambitious.
And then it sort of grew from that to we wound up having 3-day festivals over Memorial Day.
The Damariscotta Mills Alewife Festival was huge. I attended a couple before the pandemic, and the whole area around the fish ladder was packed with people. Food, live music, alewife merch, activities for kids, and a long line for smoked alewives.
All of a sudden we were having these big, big crowds of people, and it didn't matter if it rained. It didn't matter. They still came. And it's like the number of people who come here who have no idea why they're here. They don't know what an alewife is. They don't know what a fish ladder is. They don't know which direction things are going. They have no clue. And they're from all over the world. And they're just amazed. And it's fun. It's fun talking to them. It's fun, showing them what's going on and watching their faces. And it's just, so the festival was like this huge concentration of people who, okay, we're here. Why?
Kind of like the alewives.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Those festivals raised awareness and money that helped fund the rebuilding project, along with donations and grants.
But probably of the sort of, say, $1 million, maybe 25 to 30% of that came from the group of neighbors who lived around here who got together and decided to make it happen by selling hot dogs, t-shirts, ice cream, just stuff like that. It was an amazing sort of community effort to be a part of.
That fundraising came in handy because the rebuilding project turned out to be way more complicated and expensive than they'd expected. For one thing, work on the fish ladder could only happen during the winter, before the fish run in spring, and after the fall when the juvenile alewife make their way downstream to the ocean. And working outside in the winter in Maine isn't a whole lot of fun. But Mark's background is in construction, and he likes a challenge.
And that's why, to me, the tearing this out and putting it all back together was just this really challenging, interesting project to try to figure out the logistics and get my head wrapped around and talk my subs into coming, like the concrete guys and the stone guys, and all of us learning together. As we came downstream, we got better and better and better at it.
It took 10 years to completely rebuild the fish ladder. But the results have been pretty dramatic. In 2007, before they got started, About 80,000 fish made their way up the crumbling fish ladder. These days, they get over 1 million.
And now you're doing this. You're doing the harvesting. Is that by choice, or is that just because they needed an extra pair of hands, or do you like doing it?
I manage the harvest. I'm the fish agent for the towns of Noblesboro and Newcastle. So, I'm the one that runs the thing. I do enjoy it. I do enjoy it. I enjoy the guys. I enjoy the meeting people. I don't enjoy the killing of fish. It's not my thing. It's it's kind of a magical place. I mean, it's interesting. One of the things that I really think is kind of cool for me in my role is, it's like going down in that building, the check office down there. Well, that was from, I think, 1882 or something. And there's, initials and names and stuff written all through there of all the guys that have sat in there and harvested. And they've all listened to the same sounds, and they've all, yes, things have changed and the world has changed. The use of alewives has changed, but the river hasn't, and the fish really haven't. And so it's sort of this connection, back through time and hopefully on beyond me, And the smell, that's another unique thing. It's a good thing the lilacs bloom around here.
Yeah, it's perfect.
That's it for this episode of The Briny. Thanks for listening. Special thanks this episode to Isaac Kestenbaum. If you like The Briny, please take a moment to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really does help people find the show. And if you have any comments or ideas for future episodes, please send me a note. My email is matt@thebriny.net. The Briny is a proud member of Hub and Spoke, a collective of independent podcasts, including The Rabbis Go South, a new 7-part narrative series about Jewish Black solidarity during the Civil Rights Movement. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Check out all the Hub and Spoke shows at hubspokeaudio.org.